name is Mark Roffers. I am the consulting village planner. I've been doing that for about 15 years now, and this is my third comprehensive plan for the Village of DeForest. And this is also the third in our series of online community meetings associated with update to the comprehensive plan. The other folks that you might see in your side view mirror there include Village Administrator Steve Falgren, Brandy Cooper, Zoning Administrator and MC tonight, and Michelle Laurie, who's going to be manning the chat room for much of the meeting, but also has a guest appearance early in the presentation. And we also have, I see the village president is here, and at least 2, maybe 3 trustees are in the room. It's always a little bit hard for me to tell sometimes with the naming and the lack of faces. My kids' teachers complain about this all the time, so I'll try not to lay heavy on you. But in any case, what I'd like to do initially is talk a little bit about what is a comprehensive plan, in case some of you have not had experience with our process or with planning before. So Brandy, you can go ahead and get started, and we'll just give a little primer as to what we're doing here. DeForest Comprehensive Plan was last updated in 2015. You can visit the village's webpage, and it's you can get to it, pretty easily from the cover page there. The plan is guided by a broad vision. We've been working on the update for about 6 months now. We've put together a draft vision working with our Planning and Zoning Commission. You can see it on the right-hand side of your screen. The comprehensive plan provides a 20-year vision for development in the community and preservation, and identifying which areas are appropriate for housing versus industrial use versus commercial. It guides detailed decisions on zoning and subdivision. So when you see or hear about a zoning proposal coming forward, it's our job to compare it against the village's comprehensive plan as it exists at that time. And the comprehensive plan also provides a base or a foundation for a lot of other activities in the community, including housing and economic development programs, the village's various tax incremental districts, investments in roads and utilities and where they occur and where they don't occur. So it's a pretty important policy document for the village. So why are we tackling the comprehensive plan right now? Just 6 years after the last plan. Well, as I don't need to tell you, we're in a pretty transitional time here, and different communities are thinking and repositioning themselves to try to answer the question of how and where will we live, work, play, and shop in the future. Just as one example, as you probably are aware, the pandemic has significantly increased online buying. Amazon is doing quite well. Local mom and pop shops and even bigger box retailers without a significant online presence are not doing as well. So that affects how much land we plan for commercial development and how we think about that in the future. The other reason we're working on this update is that as of just a few days ago, we have an entirely new set of village trustees from what we had back in 2015. The plan is ultimately adopted by the village board. And so having a new village board with an opportunity to shape its own policy for the village is I think, critical. We've got other agencies, including our Plan Commission and Community Development Authority, that are either new or have a lot of new players on them. The other thing, and this is good news, is that a lot of the things that were laid out in the 2015 comprehensive plan have been completed. And still others, especially with the changes we're seeing in the housing market, for instance, which we're going to talk about a lot today, may be out of date or at least should be revisited. So we're taking an approach to tackle a comprehensive plan update chapter by chapter. There's 9 or 10 chapters in the comprehensive plan. The 2 that we felt had the highest priority were called Housing and Neighborhoods is one of them, and Economic Development is the second. So for tonight, now that you have that basic primer on the objectives for the meeting, I'll provide a little bit of an overview for what we hope to accomplish. First, in just a little bit, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle to talk about economic development, where we are in the progress on that chapter, which is a little further ahead of our main topic tonight, but very closely related. I'd like to review with you what's in the current comprehensive plan related to housing and neighborhood policies affecting how we look at current development proposals today. We've got a great new set of data related to housing and the housing market that I'd like to just share some highlights with you about. And then we've begun to talk about, with the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Community Development Authority, and others, what potential policy directions, how this chapter, housing and neighborhoods, might change as we look forward to the future. So before I turn it over to Michelle, I want to, this is not intended to be a one-way communication stream tonight. Many of you are Zoom vets, probably zoomed out, but in any case, what we're going to be doing is providing both an opportunity for presentation and then an opportunity for interaction, and mixed up a little bit through the course of the meeting. We're going to be muting you for the early part of this meeting, but we'll be unmuting you, especially if you have questions or comments at the end. Again, your choice to use the webcam. If you care to adjust your name and how you're identified, you can click on participants. Chat. We're going to be using the chat today. If you have a particular question, whether it's a technical question, you can't hear me, you can't see the presentation, something's not working, please let us know and we'll try to help you. Or if you have a particular comment or reaction to something that's being said, go ahead and put it in the chat. That'll be recorded and part of the record of this meeting. And then finally, if you have a particular question about some of the information we're presenting or not presenting that you'd like to learn more about, put that in the chat, and we'll be, again, monitoring it, and I'll be coming up from air from time to time and be able to answer questions. We have, in addition to chatting, we have 4 or 5 poll questions to have a little bit of fun, but also to get some input from you. Your answers to the poll questions are anonymous. We don't know where they're coming from. You'll see the responses in real time here tonight. Your chat is not, your responses are not anonymous to the chat. The only thing we ask about the chat is you know, keep it to the topic of the meeting and you know, the task at hand here tonight. So we have our first poll question. We're interested in this, I think, applies to everyone here at the meeting except staff people. We're asking, in which part of the Village of DeForest do you live? And we've got it in writing and also on this map, but let me help you with the map for those of you who don't look at maps every day, all the time like I do. Area number 1 is everything west of Main Street. That's north of Western Green Park in the village. Area number 3 is everything in Rivers Turn and Hawthorne Point within Conservancy Place and a couple of other areas to the south. Again, still west of Main. I guess it's called Lake Road in that neck of the woods. And then area 2 is everything in between. So if you're in Sunnybrook or Woods Glen, you're in area 2. And then the other areas 4 and 5, 4 is everything south of Jefferson Street, more or less south of the middle school and high school. And area 5 is north of Jefferson, both east of Main Street. And then area 6 is if you live in Fox Hill Estates or Savannah Brooks, you're in area 6. So Brandy, I already popped the poll question up. Maybe some of you have taken it because you're tired of listening to me, but please let us know, you know, where you live. It'd be good to get a snapshot of who's in the room here tonight.
Okay, I'm just going to give a couple more seconds here for everybody to respond, and then I'll end this poll question. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end it, and then I will share those results. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of a screen problem here.
Hey, Mark,
And there was a question, South Street is in area 2.
I can't get the poll. There we go.
You scared me there for a second.
I know, it like minimized on my screen, so I couldn't find it.
So we have most folks, a plurality of folks, I should say, live south of the high school and middle school, but north of Windsor Road, so in area 4. We also have a fair number of people from the Conservancy Place area and a group that doesn't live in the village that responded as well. So thank you for your responses. We can close the poll question. I think we might have one more answer that suggests in area 2. So we'll make sure we correct that at the end here tonight. Okay. And Brandy, we are now seeing your whole screen, not just the presentation.
Yeah, for some reason when I do the polls, it shrinks down my screen that I'm sharing. So.
And yeah,
and now.
Yes, we're all good.
Okay.
And thank you for coming. Yeah, even if you're not a resident of the village, I saw a business person for the area. Awesome. And these issues, as you'll see, tie directly to business and business development in the community. So with that, we're going to turn it over to Michelle, who's going to talk a little bit about economic development before we move on and talk about housing.
Well, great. Thanks, Mark. Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Laurie. I am the Community Development Director for the Village of DeForest, and I'm glad to be here with you this evening. I'm just going to talk very briefly about some of what's gone on with the progress of the Economic Development Chapter, and just to review with what was in the 2015 Economic Development and Downtown chapters. They were separate chapters at that time. 3 things that are going to remain part of the chapter in the 2020 update, and that is a work plan for business retention and expansion, looking into target markets for new business growth, and really looking at a blueprint for downtown development. All of those things are going to feature prominently in this chapter. An outreach that we've done to date, we did a business walk in the fall, and I know some of you on the call tonight have participated in that survey. We had a great survey of the businesses of DeForest, really seeing what is going on in their business and what is happening and what they'd like to see in the future. So that was very helpful. The online community meeting in December, if you were here with us in December, I think it was December 6th, if I recall correctly, early December, so a little bit ago. We talked about kind of the relationship between growth and economic development, as well as what we wanted to focus on moving forward in specific. And then we had a business advisory group where we had a few businesses who marked in the survey in the fall that they'd like to be participants in moving things forward and coming to solutions of challenges that they have in the area. And we had this business advisory group, and it was a Zoom. And we met with a small round table. They were able to kind of focus on what they're seeing. And this is going to focus, really fold into, I should say, what we're doing in this chapter. And so I can say that what in the business walk survey and the business advisory group, what was focused on was people, the need for people. So workforce was a big piece of what, and I think we're finding that all over the state of Wisconsin and all over the country really, is the need for workforce and people. So we're going to dive into what that really means for economic development in the future for DeForest. So Brandy, you can go ahead and go to the next. So some highlights for the 2021 chapter. And, really the desire of existing businesses and residents for more amenities. That is what we found in the comprehensive survey. I've been doing economic development for about 20 years, and that is certainly not surprising that more residents and businesses want more amenities, places to have lunch, places to go out. and what that connection is to residential growth and why that's so important to have these chapters really talked about together. Housing and land use, and how we're going to accommodate for that growth in the residential sector, as well as how do we plan for our commercial growth. And we know we've hit some challenges with commercial growth in this era of COVID-19, and thank goodness we're seeming to come out of it and that things are changing. But as Mark kind of alluded to at the beginning, there are things that are going to stay with us, and that's probably internet fulfillment, things like that. So, commercial growth is changing. How does residential growth lend to that commercial growth? And I know what I hear from when I go to commercial coffee shops and restaurants and things, and they say, well, what is your 5-minute radius from the site of businesses and houses? So they're very interested in what the growth is, what the funding is around the area, what the median growth incomes are, that sort of thing. So very, very closely connected. I can't highlight that enough. A second, a comprehensive look at economic development, including downtown and other redevelopment opportunities. That focused very, very strongly in our survey of residents, that we would need to really get the need for taking a comprehensive look at both. That's why we decided to combine the two chapters, because really our economic development has to do, our downtown is a very big feature of that. So this chapter will highlight that very closely. A place in DeForest, a place for events and tourism and economic development. So sometimes when we think of economic development, we think of a business or location or that sort of thing, but really events and tourism, even though they've been cut short a little bit by COVID-19, the pandemic, that they are coming back. And really, what picture in the future does that have for DeForest? We have a great opportunity with the wonderful athletic complex and the tournaments we're having come, even this year, and other things. How does that help our existing businesses, and how does it help to grow new businesses? And then finally, I want to talk about placemaking. That's kind of a trend and kind of a term that you've probably heard a little bit about. It's actually an old concept, but it's very trendy right now in economic development. And I think DeForest is a wonderful place to really look at placemaking and what that means. There's a reason that folks move to DeForest and live in DeForest. And what is that reason? We found out from the survey that there is the desire to have amenities and to have things that are filled with growth, but there's also the desire to keep a certain small town feel, certain distance from Madison, maybe what we call in our marketing a place apart from Madison. And so that is really, how do we do that with land use? How do we accomplish both objectives? And that is something we're really going to look at in this economic development chapter. Go ahead, Brandy. And this is just opportunities for input. My door is wide open. I really should have taken this opportunity to talk about the economic development website, but I will now. It's developdeforest.com. You can get to me anytime by that in the information, contact us. But you can also get me anytime with my email address here, as well as my phone number. I really like to get resident input because residents are very helpful in terms of attracting the businesses that they should desire. And also wanted to say that the presentation of the draft economic development chapter will be happening April 27th at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting at 6 p.m. So I'll have that in the packet, which you can get on the website a few days early. And then we'll go ahead and give a presentation on what that looks like in a little more detail. I didn't want to talk too much tonight. I know we have a lot to go through. So thanks for your time, Mark, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Michelle. Your presentation must have been appealing because we had 4 or 5 new members that streamed in while you were talking. So
must have been me.
Welcome. We're talking about economic development and housing and neighborhoods and the connections among them tonight. And there's opportunities for input here, both polls and chat. We have our chat room open for questions and comments. and we'll have an opportunity for verbal dialogue at the end of the meeting as well. And as it relates to this economic development component, I think one of the things, Michelle, that you explained to me when you had the meeting with the business advisory group was the topic really zeroed in on a couple of things. Transportation, you said, but also housing, and having enough housing to fit the folks that they employ within the community as a key priority. DeForest has about 5,500 jobs. It's a lot of people that work in the community. You're not a bedroom, just a bedroom. You're an employment center as well. And part of the question I think we have as a community and the village board has is to what extent does the village care to match housing to the jobs that exist here within the community. So I'm going to talk a little bit, take us back again to 2015 and talk a little bit about the current policies within the housing and neighborhoods chapter now, transitioning over to that as a sort of a benchmark. So in 2015, the objectives that chapter had are listed on the screen. The idea was to promote a housing mix that promoted a family-oriented community, that promoted owner occupancy as a foundation of the community, and it emphasized single-family housing, and we'll talk more about that in a second. We were coming out in 2015 of the so-called Great Recession, in which there were periods of time where the village was issuing building permits for 4-6 homes per year. And I think there was some interest in getting that going, and particularly getting the single family market going. Can't talk about housing without talking about the places housing grows, and those are neighborhoods. So the idea with neighborhood development within the 2015 comprehensive plan and broad policy objectives or broad objectives was to provide an attractive living environment, to build neighborhoods around the numerous natural assets in the community, such as the Yahara River, to orient neighborhoods towards safety for pedestrians and children, again, this family-oriented focus, and to interconnect neighborhoods to each other, to parks, to jobs, and to shopping opportunities in the community. So those were the objectives, kind of broad ideas. Turning to the next slide, the plan got a little bit more specific and talked about initiatives, things that the village was going to try to do after the 2015 plan was implemented. And one of them was to achieve, again, taking off on the objective, a housing mix that emphasized single family housing. And there were some specific numbers. There are some specific numbers. There was a target that in the plan that suggests we know we're at about 60% single family. We'd like to grow that number to 65%. That is a goal in the current comprehensive plan. And in order to accomplish that, one of the implementing tools, the levers, was for new neighborhoods that developed on farm fields or open spaces that at least 75% of new housing units would be single family units. So that is a policy. That's one thing that we are very intensively revisiting as part of this plan update, because we know from experience that the market for other types of housing, condominiums, multiple family rentals, multiple family owner, has grown in Dane County and the nation and in our area. So part of our big challenge here is to figure out how to calibrate that particular policy to the new reality of the market. Other initiatives was to make sure that we're out ahead of development within neighborhoods, and the village has enough policy guidance to share with developers and landowners where parks ought to be and which roads we want to make sure get extended through, and what types of uses might be appropriate here versus in a different part of a neighborhood. And so preparing or requiring developers to prepare neighborhood plans before developing was a key part of the 2015 plan. And the plan didn't talk a lot about rental housing or affordable housing for seniors or low and moderate income folks. It did give a nod to those particular issues, and it suggested that in terms of development quality, we should hold all housing to similar high standards to make sure that that is carried throughout the entire community. So that's a nutshell of where the 2015 plan sat or sits on housing and neighborhoods. One of the things that we know is that everyone has a particular story about housing. It could be how much it costs. It could be that you're not sure who's moving to these new apartments, or even if they're getting filled up at all. And there's a lot of anecdotes out there. We have plenty of them too. And talking to the fire chief and having his firefighters not be able to find places to live. School district, same story. But the village board and the CDA really thought it was important to kind of cut through the anecdotes and provide some hard data to support, answer the question, what do we need in terms of housing in the community and for whom? So we've got some data to share with you tonight about that. First off, you've had a very significant decade of growth in the community, and your significant growth, those 1,500 new residents I had on a previous slide, are coming in because you have new housing for those folks. We've had about 80 new housing units built per year each year since 2010. That's noteworthy because the first two were pretty slim.
Mhm.
And so about 1 in every 5 housing units in the village today has been built in the last 10 years. So a lot of new folks, a lot of new housing units. Over that period, and probably in part at least as a result of the policy, but also certainly the market, the housing mix has remained fairly stable at 60% single family. That's a lot different than some other communities in the area. Sun Prairie, Madison have seen a significant change in the single to multiple family housing mix. DeForest has remained relatively stable. So we have a question for you before we present the next information. It's kind of like you helping us predict the future here, at least having a little fun. So the question is, which community in Dane County do you think had the greatest percentage price increase for existing single family home sales over the past decade? And Brandy's going to pop up the actual poll question and your choices. So we'd like, everyone who's not a staff person to weigh in on this question. Some may have some advanced knowledge, but we'll let it slide.
All right, I'll give just a few more seconds here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling now, and I will share the results.
So half of you guessed correctly that it's DeForest Windsor had the greatest percentage increase in home value prices over the last decade. I'll share with you some stats on the next slide to kind of verify that. So thank you for participating in that poll. Half of you passed. So as we make Brandy work here, this slide shows the stats. Between 2009 and 2019, sale of existing homes in the DeForest Windsor market, according to the MLS, went up 71%. So that was the highest in the county. Went from being very similar to Sun Prairie and below the average in Dane County for suburban communities to above both of those communities. So a significant price increase in the DeForest Windsor area, and that in part was by design. It was this effort to increase the market potential for single family housing. It was citing developments in areas that are appealing for people, Savannah Brooks, Conservancy Place, I'm going to forget others that are just great environments for building housing, and brought the whole market up. So this is an interesting story. So we have these numbers, 60%, 65%, et cetera. And it's important to kind of keep in mind and understand that there's a mix of housing units that haven't necessarily all been built yet, but that have been entitled through zoning approvals within some bigger neighborhoods within the community. So you see here 4 particular neighborhoods where this applies. And some of these approvals date back almost 20 years for these types of these housing units. And in many cases, Heritage Gardens and Conservancy Place are good examples of that. The initial emphasis and the initial market was in single family housing. And a lot of that single family stock that you see there, 386, 310, was built. But a lot of the multiple family development that was entitled was allowed by zoning. The market wasn't there yet for whatever reason. The market throughout the county has grown. A lot of the best sites in other locations, Sun Prairie, north side of Madison, have been used up. There's a new market and a new demand here in the area, and you're regionally positioned very well. So the reality is that of these developments, which make up a big part of the housing in the community, about 43% of the approved housing units are single family. So that is our sort of baseline, and with our comprehensive plan, we may be able to have some influence on this, but probably not much. So we're really dealing with the lands outside of these areas, and what our policies ought to be in particular for the areas outside of what's already been approved. More stats on this. And so we've got these 2 studies you see on the bottom of the screen, DeForest Windsor Housing Supply and Demand Analysis, a big long study that we worked on and shared with both Windsor and DeForest for both communities. Found a lot of interesting things. First off, median income for homeowners within the DeForest Windsor area grew by about 30%, while we had that 70% housing sale price increase. For renters, the story is very similar, very little income growth compared to rents going up about 30%. What we have and what the impact is, particularly this first stat, is that many folks that might have in a different market been in the home buying mode are compelled to rent for longer than they want to, or for an indefinite period of time. So that thereby increases the demand and cost of rental housing, and it makes rentals less available and affordable to other folks. So there's an interesting dynamic. This is not at all unique to DeForest or Windsor. It's a county thing, it's a state thing, it's a national thing. So we have another question for you. And this question relates to sort of who's driving this demand, and how are we experiencing so much growth in costs and so many housing units built. So the question is, what percentage of households moving into a brand new home in our school district, the DeForest Area School District, moved from outside of the district? So that's where I got the data. So the question is, if you bought a new home in DeForest and Windsor within the district, was your previous home in the district, or was it from area outside? Now I'll shut up and let you answer.
All right, I'll give just a few more seconds here. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling, and then I'll share the results.
Okay, in the lead was between 20 and 40%, followed by between 60 and 80%. The reality is it's between 60 and 80%. We did a survey of folks who built new homes in 2018 in DeForest and Windsor. The survey responses suggest that 72% of those folks didn't live in the district before they moved and bought their new home in the district. Similarly, when we talk to folks that manage apartments, new apartments and otherwise, we find that about the same percentage of folks who come to the community for home ownership also come to the community to rent. And that's maybe surprising at first, but as you think about it, it's indicative of a growing community. You can't possibly grow the way DeForest has grown by just having babies and waiting for them to grow up. There is outside growth that occurs that brings other folks to the community and creates this kind of thriving environment that allows other things to crop up, like a trail system and new commercial opportunities. So it's a number that's bigger than most people think, but it probably holds true across the board. And it's important when we think about things like workforce housing in the community. So more stats. I'll try to pick it up here to enable some more time at the end. So that's that number. It's about 72, 75%. In the next 10 years, what do we expect? Well, we expect about over 2,000 households between DeForest and Windsor in growth, about half of them being seniors. Now, these aren't all seniors moving to the area. These are folks that are not seniors that'll become seniors by 2030, at least by number or age. And we expect also that we'll have a continued churn and demand for new multiple family units based on a number of factors. And between the two communities, believe that it's readily attainable to fill 100 new multiple family rental units over the 10-year period. So there's a continued demand. So the other thing we're finding, and we found in this study, is that the current supply of workforce housing is low in DeForest and Windsor. So the left oval represents the typical salary that's earned by most people within DeForest's 5,500 person workforce. These are line workers, teachers, protective services workers in that 45 to 55,000 range. In contrast, even the new apartments that are being built typically require, as a condition of getting a lease, a household income of between 55 and 75,000. So there's this very little area of intersection between what's being built in the community and what workers in the community can afford to rent. And you might say, well, there's older apartments that they can move into and rent, but we looked into that, and even if you look at the older apartments, we see some affordability challenges happening as rents go up without incomes going up accordingly. So housing demand, senior housing demand also, in addition to workforce, is exceeding supply. And that's not terribly surprising. Since 2010, between the two communities, we have 900 more senior households, folks that are over 65, and a minimal increase in housing that's specifically designed or intended for seniors. That's not going to change over the next 10 years, especially in DeForest, have a large number of households between their late 40s and early 60s. So we're almost certainly going to have continued growth in the senior population over the next 10 years. As we look at incomes of seniors 10 years ago compared to today, relatively stagnant and actually declining when accounting for inflation, comparing those 2 years. And then a supply of housing that is actually income restricted and designed to be affordable for low and moderate income senior folks has remained at 98 units in DeForest and none in Windsor for a number of years. So what we came up with in our study, and I encourage you to visit the webpage and review it yourself, is a need for what we're calling affordable, and I'll get to the definition in a second. About 200 units of affordable rental units are needed today to satisfy the current resident population, with about a third of those needed for seniors. And as the community grows, we expect that need to grow to close to 300 units and 130 senior units. Those are just for residents that we expect and we know that are already in the community. If we made an assumption, because it's harder to get data, if we just had 5 or 10% of DeForest non-resident workforce also needing housing in the community, those numbers would pretty much double or more than double. So we've got a need for affordable housing. So what do I mean by affordable? Affordable by this definition was that the household earned no more than 80% of the county median income, which for our county is pretty high, and they would pay no more than 30% of their income for rent, which is based on some federal standards. So we asked the community in the survey, Michelle alluded to it, and I apologize for not explaining this. We did the community survey in October. Many of you may have taken the survey. We had a few housing related questions. We found support for affordable single family and senior housing and for market rate apartments through that survey. We asked what types of housing the village should promote, and we gave all these choices you see on the screen. And single family housing less than 350,000 was pretty close to the top. I can tell you, you can't get a new single family house in DeForest for that price presently. Another top choice, senior housing with lower than average costs was up there as well. We asked specific questions then about senior housing. You can go ahead, Brandy. Yeah, that's fine.
Sorry.
Yep. So, and we found broad support among those surveyed for affordable senior housing. We asked if folks would support construction or more housing that is affordable for senior citizens with less than average income. 62% of the respondents said yes, including in or near my own neighborhood, with additional 25% saying yes, but put it somewhere else in the community. So that's a pretty resounding yes in this world. We also asked a similar question for affordable housing for non-seniors. Would you support construction of more housing that is affordable for all persons with less than average income? And you can see the support levels dropped a little bit. Including in or near my neighborhood went from 62 to 27. Elsewhere in the village went up a little bit. So it depends on your perspective. And looking at this table, about 60% thought yes, the DeForest should accommodate for it. There's obviously a challenge in citing this type of development, and that bears out in different communities. And we're going to talk about that in a second too. There was mixed feelings about how the village should promote new housing, or if, but minimally when new development occurred, the items in the green box were the top rated choices for priorities in evaluating proposals. A lot of them related to setting aside enough land for open space and protecting natural resources as part of the process. And then there was a category of making sure that the off-site impacts of development were properly accounted for: schools, traffic, and effects on surrounding neighborhoods. So those are the things that, again, help us in developing policies for new neighborhoods as we go forward with this plan update. So now we're going to unleash the chat, and I would love to get your questions or comments. I know Michelle's been trying to prompt you as well. What part of the information that we've shared so far do you think is most useful or pertinent as we think about DeForest's policies for housing and neighborhoods in our new plan? So get those fingers chatting. And I think what the best thing to do would be think about that question. Drop your notes in the chat. We'll continue with the presentation, and then Michelle, you interrupt me so that we can share the responses when they, maybe in 5 minutes or so. So with all this information, there's a few potential directions that the new Housing and Neighborhoods chapter can take. We are a little bit behind Michelle in in her drafting of the economic development chapter, we expect to have a housing and neighborhoods draft chapter available for Planning and Zoning Commission review at the end of May. For consideration by the village board in June. We'll have some conversations with those two bodies and the Community Development Authority before that. These are some potential directions that have been discussed and could be included, and we're interested in sharing them with you and getting your reaction. So one of them is this housing mix policy. That's really sort of been the #1 topic. And so we talked at the Planning and Zoning Commission about this already. And we have 3 kind of broad choices. One of them is just continue this current policy of trying to get at least 75% of all new housing units in new neighborhoods to be single family, and try to increase the percentage of single family in the community as a whole from 60 to 65% over the next 15-year time frame. So that equates to let's continue this real strong emphasis on single family housing within the plan. Another option would be to be a little bit more flexible within these new neighborhood areas, but still maintain a community-wide goal. Maybe that's 65, maybe it drops to 60%, which is the current percentage. But make sure that we're retaining standards for good neighborhoods. So we're not going to just unleash anything goes within neighborhoods, but the quantitative policies would be set aside for new neighborhood development, at least a specific number. And then the third option is keeping track of these quantities is hard. It's challenging to the market and maybe where housing is going. Let's remove both these types of percentages. But again, make sure that we're accounting for all these impacts when new neighborhoods come in and we have good design standards in place. As I mentioned, we've talked about this with the Planning and Zoning Commission. We have had some initial reaction. The reaction is tilting a little bit towards option 2, but not everyone has weighed in. We've got some new plan commissioners, and I think a need for further thought on the policy too. This is something that we certainly would welcome, your thoughts and questions on as we kind of move forward towards a new policy in this area. Michelle, is there anything that you'd like to share now, or should I keep going a little bit while you process?
Sure, I'll go ahead and share a couple of things. So we've gotten some comments about excitement about more businesses coming to DeForest, and that growth would lead to that. Keeping in mind the growth, but not becoming some Prairie or Madison. So kind of as we were saying, what happened in the comprehensive plan survey that we did last fall is wanting to maintain a place apart. And then certainly some comments about listening to residents for what they are saying, communicating to us. Also the growth of the senior population being very important. Also the need for affordable housing so that people can work here and they can afford to live here. And attracting higher paid jobs as well. So part of economic development, attracting diverse jobs.
Very good. Well, thank you. This input is important and will be definitely included in the mix as we go forward here. Next slide, please. So another policy that we're looking at is providing a greater emphasis in the plan than was in the 2015 plan for affordable housing for seniors and/or the local workforce. And I have listed a number of different tools that might be utilized if this is an initiative that the village may want to include in the plan. We've got an opportunity for redevelopment planning and implementation. I'll mention one site, the Holm Education Center is surplus property. Could be a good home for some affordable housing for seniors or workforce, very proximate to jobs in the downtown. The village, as I mentioned a little earlier, has tax incremental districts that provide incentives for development. They can be calibrated or even extended to support housing, particularly in a redevelopment setting, but not necessarily. There's a bevy of grants that are available to improve housing and to help folks get into and afford housing. There's also a number of private developers in our area that build affordable housing without with a tax credit without a direct government incentive. Zoning standards could be recalibrated to reduce costs per unit. It's a challenging time to build affordable housing. What can the government do to maybe get out of the way in areas that it doesn't need to be in the way? Keeping the current stock decent so it remains not just affordable for folks, but habitable is a potential emphasis. There could be greater partnerships, including with developers, local banks, continued interaction with employers, and then continued monitoring to see how we're doing over time.
Mark, could you go ahead and again talk about defining affordable in this scenario?
Yeah, I think that's really up to each community. I don't mean to weasel out of it, but the affordability standard, I guess, federally, is that if you earn 80% or less of the county's median income and have to spend 30% or more of your income on housing, you do not have affordable housing. So it really depends on the resident population and the resident workforce to determine what it means for DeForest. So stepping back to those numbers that I had a little bit earlier, those 200 units, 300 units, that's at least how we determine the affordable rental demand in the community. Affordable single family housing is a little bit different. It's very difficult for the many people in the DeForest workforce to afford to buy a house in DeForest. That's a tougher nut to crack, frankly, for the workforce. But we've also, we see that growing discrepancy between incomes and housing prices, and we know we also have an affordable single family or an affordable ownership potential issue. That doesn't necessarily have to be subsidized housing. It could be other things to accommodate housing at greater densities, smaller lot sizes, different forms of housing to bring some of those prices down a little bit, at least for new housing.
Thank you. I think, what you said before too, if you don't mind me saying, is that, we're looking at talking to our fire chief and our school district and saying, really making sure there is housing stock available for those folks as well.
Yeah, the folks that educate us, the folks that keep us safe, finding a place in the community for them to live. So I heard, don't want to become Madison or Sun Prairie, and I've heard that, just once or twice before from my work in DeForest. And so I wanted to share a little bit about that in the next slide. So this is not just a City of Madison issue or a desire to bring Madison to DeForest. We got this great case study that Nick and I learned about for the Village of Oregon. They a few years ago had a citizen-initiated initiative that said, we have an affordable housing problem in Oregon. Our kids can't live here. I as a senior, I'd love to leave my house, but I have no place to go to that I can afford. As a result, they actually did one of these things. They had a tax incremental district that under Wisconsin law, they extended the term of that district, and they were able to devote all the increment, all the taxes for that extra year to fund affordable housing. And they've been spreading that among a couple of different things. And also as part of that initiative, and at least partially funded by this fund, the village approached Habitat for Humanity, which is an affordable housing organization in the area based on sweat equity into a house, resulted in a small scale project in that community for 8 affordable duplex units for low and moderate income folks. Separate affordable housing tax credit program. So this is a federal program. Private developers develop it. They get approved for tax credits from the state. People who invest in these tax credits get income from it. It's an investment. And there was a recently approved project for that. We're seeing things like that in other communities. Wanakee recently had a 50-unit affordable project built, approved on Main Street west of McDonald's, if you know Wanakee. So this is an issue throughout Dane County, and many communities in the county are responding to it by developing policies that are supportive of building housing for all folks in the community. And I think another thing I wanted to share with you on that one is that the housing ought to look good. You know, the last thing we want to do is build a community where we say, well, there's where the affordable housing is, and there's where the not affordable housing is. So this is an image shot of that tax credit project. So the next slide, Brandy, thank you, is the question, again, another potential policy within the comp plan is, should we have siting and design criteria for higher density housing where it might be appropriate? And I know this has been a hot issue in the community. So what should be our standards for where we locate housing development that has 25 units per acre or 12.5 units per acre? And what should we expect of them in design? So this is an initial crack at some standards for siting, you know, placing housing within neighborhoods or vibrant mixed use setting, as opposed to saying, here, you live on the edge of the community or in this place that no one else wants to live in or build in. It works better. It's a more lasting strategy. Making sure there's adequate roads, utilities, paths in that area. Making sure they're visible and they have good access to the community. Close to the things that all folks need and want: parks, schools, shopping, and services. And the idea is that when we get to the land use chapter, we'll hopefully utilize these criteria to identify locations in the community that make sense. I'll spend less time on design. These are elements of good design based on, again, on the notion that all types of housing, higher density or lower density, should respect and reflect the community. So this could be another initiative within the plan, and something we're obviously developing based on these at least initial outline of standards. And then the final thing I'll mention is that we've got, I think, a particular, oh, you can go forward, Brandy. We've got a particular need and interest in developing one of these neighborhood plans for what we call the West River Road corridor. Everything from basically the KOA campground down to the undeveloped parts of Conservancy Place, where the cell tower is, west of River Road. So we're going to be working diligently over the next few weeks on developing a kind of a layout, a proposed plan for this area in collaboration with the owners of those properties. Some of the key objectives initially are to advise housing mix strategies and relationships that are both sustainable and marketable and respect the community. Another policy objective might be to transition to non-residential uses to the north and the south, and to the single-family neighborhoods we have to the east, making sure we're accounting for those existing housing units. Protect environmental corridors, interconnected roads, a lot of these policies that you've heard already. So stay tuned. This map is not the neighborhood plan map. This is the area we're looking at for developing that. And obviously it's an area of the community that's of great interest to a lot of folks. So those were I think it was four different initiatives that we're probing as part of this process. And the next slide gives you a chance to react specifically to them, but we'd also like your general reactions as the last part of our meeting tonight. So you'll see them on screen, but which of these potential initiatives should be the village's highest priority for housing in neighborhoods in terms of our focus? And then we'll ask you what exactly you think we ought to do with these initiatives. So here's the choices. They're a little bit, to give you some substance to them. One of the choices, should we maintain the current housing mix policy? That's that 75% new neighborhoods, 65% village-wide. Should we be more flexible than that? In other words, options 2 or 3 that you saw in that previous slide. Should we, in the new plan, promote more affordable senior housing units? Should we promote more affordable housing units for the DeForest workforce, these teachers, line workers, protective services folks? Should we include better siting and design criteria for higher density housing? And should we develop a new neighborhood plan for this West River Road corridor? So I think you can check any or all of them. And again, if you have another, check it here and then drop it in the chat. We can certainly move in different directions if there's a groundswell for different directions.
Okay, I'll just give a few more seconds for anyone to respond, and then I'll go ahead and end the poll. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end. Oh, we still have a couple coming in, so give me a second. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll now. And I will share the results.
Okay, with respect to the housing mix policy, you see the challenge that we have, relatively equal number of folks of our limited sample, suggesting we keep it as is or make it more flexible. As we saw in the survey, more affordable senior housing units has had support, followed by more affordable workforce housing units among our sample here tonight. So those are things that we're working with, we'll be working with the CDA on, in particular in upcoming meetings, and trying to define what that means for DeForest and fitting in with the broader framework and the vision for the DeForest community. And again, if you said other, please let us know what that other might have been in the chat. Other questions we'd like to kind of close with. You can go on to the next slide. I'm sorry, Brandy, I'm stumbling there a little bit. Please continue in the chat, or we're going to provide the opportunity just to open up the mics to share your thoughts on these potential initiatives for the plan, or are there others that we ought to prioritize through the new plan? This is your a great opportunity for you to help us write the housing and neighborhoods chapter. So what I'd like to say is, again, the chat will remain open if you want to use the chat. If you would like to just speak and let us know verbally what your thoughts are within like a minute, we'd love to hear from you verbally here tonight, and we'll be all this will be recorded appropriately regardless of how you choose to participate. So I think the easiest way to do this is to either wave your real hand and we'll try to find you, or wave your Zoom hand by pressing the appropriate button and we'll try to find you on the screen. And I think, Randy, we can probably turn off the presentation now so we can get a full screen view. And again, if you have anything you'd like to share with us, again, dump it in the chat or raise your hand. And we'll unmute you. Don't make me call on you.
I'm not seeing any hands raised for discussion questions. Oh, I see Abe Degnan just raised his hand, so we'll go ahead and Abe, you'll need to unmute. And then if we could just keep your questions or responses to about under a minute, okay?
Well, I'm just really curious why we're doing a comprehensive plan update after making a decision on an apartment building and giving TIF for residential construction that actually was in violation of the adopted comprehensive plan. Why didn't we have an opportunity for comprehensive plan input first, and why are we going backwards here when there's a conflicting land use? Windsor turned down a quarry because of their comprehensive plan, and yet DeForest's answer is that we can just flex the comprehensive plan whatever way we want and move boundaries around, and the land use really doesn't matter, and we can put an apartment where it says that something else was supposed to go. Why are we doing this backwards?
I can respond, I think, Abe, to you. I don't know if it'll be a satisfactory response, but I'll do my best. Conservancy Place has received zoning approval for up to 700 units and some change of multiple family housing. The rules for developing Conservancy Place have been established by that planned unit development. There is very little the community can do once that has occurred to unzone a particular property for what's been previously approved. So those developments that I had shared, I don't know if you were in the meeting when I shared that, those 4 that have received entitlements are a little bit outside of the reach of the current comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan update. I think we're dealing more with what happens next in other developments that don't have that sort of pre-approval built into them. The other thing I guess I'll say in quick response is it's always very difficult to press the pause button to work on a long-range planning effort. In my experience, there is a ability under a state law to enact a moratorium to say, no, we're not going to look at anything new until we finish what we've done or what we're working on. It doesn't happen very often. It's controversial. It has sometimes unintended consequences of making the community seem anti-development, which could inadvertently scare folks and types of development away that you want to not scare away. So most communities don't hit the pause button. But I think the broader issue is that we do have these proposals coming forward for multiple family housing. Should we have started the comp plan update process 2 years ago? Perhaps, but it doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't start it now. I think the idea and the board understood that there's a lot going on in the community and a need to revisit policies that were developed in the past. Anyone else with any comments or questions or priorities that they'd like to share with us?
All right, it looks like we have Dawn Clemens has raised her hand. Dawn, if you could unmute and just limit your question or comment to about a minute.
My question is that the affordable housing for seniors, what will they be rent controlled? Some look like we have the 98 units now that are somewhat that way, where people pay, a certain amount. Is that the kind of housing that you're looking for, or are you looking for more housing of people who are downsizing from their homes and just need a 1 or 2 bedroom duplex or home? I
think the answer to, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dawn. I think the answer to your question is, both questions is yes. The village needs more housing that for folks to downsize into, that maybe priced at $200,000, maybe priced at $400,000. But there is a proven demand for that in the community, and you're seeing a lot of that in places like Conservancy Place. The other aspect of it, the affordable housing for seniors, how it generally works is that a low-income housing tax credit development is built. Say it's got 50 units in it, and what is often happening is that maybe 30, 35 units might be set aside for folks whereby they don't spend any more than 30% of their income on rent. And the tax credit, basically the developer's getting infusion of income at the front end to make that work for them for the period. And it's usually about a 15-year period where those rents are held at that level for that income population.
Mark, you
Yeah.
showed us that picture of Oregon where they did, is that something that is in consideration is doable in DeForest with the help of Habitat for Humanity or developers willing to, you know, do this kind of a housing?
It very well could be. I think establishing a policy and a program that's welcoming to that type of development is important. But as we're seeing in other communities, we have a very well developed group of developers in our area that's good at this kind of thing. So that's good for all of us. They have a lot of experience. So I think that the issue is, that we need to decide, the board does ultimately, is how supportive are we of this, and how assertive do we want to get in recruiting these developers to come and doing other things, bringing grant dollars into the community to try to make this stuff happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other particular wishes or policies? I appreciate the comments, and we're seeing in the chat. If you have any more, before we close, we'll keep the chat open. I see we're at 8:13, and we promised you an 8:15 departure. And we'd like to deliver on that, but we want to make sure that if folks do have any concluding thoughts, that they're able to share them before we leave tonight. And then I'll tell you a little bit about where we're going to go from here again.
Mark, it looks like Monique has raised her hand. Monique, if you could unmute and then just limit your question or comment to about a minute. Thank you.
Me okay?
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark, Brandy, Michelle. I just wanted to say we kind of have a story. We came to Wisconsin about 4 years ago and found ourselves in DeForest and Conservancy Place, actually renting in the apartments, condos there, because we needed a location between the Dells and downtown Madison, and it was perfect. But we did find ourselves actually now moving to Sun Prairie for housing due to not finding housing that was in our real price range where we needed to be. And now we're opening a business in Windsor. So we do wish we were now in DeForest, Windsor area. So I do appreciate this, and I understand how it can be frustrating, living in a neighborhood and now things building around you. But coming from the other side of things and experiencing this as a person in the neighborhood, I do appreciate the idea of affordable housing, and now having a business there, having a place for people to live and work and be able to afford it. So I just wanted to say thank you. Appreciate this.
Thank you. We do have a comment from Morgan in the chat. Mark, it says, how do we ensure or protect that those who currently serve or work in the community have the opportunity to these potential growth opportunities before drawing others to these areas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very difficult challenge because we live in a free society where people can choose to live where they want. But I do think, at least for the workforce, making a stronger connection to the businesses that we know need workers, and when we know something is coming on the market, to make sure that they're at least aware of it in the community and have an equal chance to get to ability to rent there or to own there would be one thing. But it is very challenging, and part of the reason I put that 75% stat up, or 72%, is that we live in a very dynamic place, and a lot of the folks that will buy and build in your community will be from other locations. And you can look at it a lot of different ways, but that's a good thing. They're investing money in your community one way or the other. They're buying a house, they're paying property taxes, they're patronizing businesses. And so even if it were possible, I don't know if it would necessarily be desirable to say, you're a longtime resident or you're a worker here, you can live here. But I think can be a generally more awareness when projects come up that, you know, the community has, and so that we can direct the fire chief to say, hey, your guys might want to get a line on, you know, this new place that's going in at the corner of X and Y.
Mhm. All right, we have Abe is, I think he raised his hand again. I don't know that I'd lowered it before.
Yes, that's correct. I
Okay.
did.
All right.
So since the change in the preliminary development plan is the reason that apartment building was allowed to violate the comprehensive plan, it's really important that the village lets neighborhood residents know when there is a change in the comprehensive zoning for the PDP, that is more directly noticed to the residents of the neighborhood. Because if my understanding is this happened in 2018, I'm a regular reader of agendas, I'm a regular reader of minutes, and somehow I missed this. And I've been talking, you guys know I'm connected to the village board, you guys know I'm connected to people. You guys gave the farm away in what has happened here. It's just unconscionable what happened. The neighborhood has to know what's happening when there are these changes in the PDP. If the PDP is going to be the excuse, if you're pushing an agenda, then just be truthful and push your agenda and be straightforward about it. But it's unbelievable how this happened in all these meetings, just coming right forth this quick with no real intention of listening to the neighborhood residents, and the facial expressions of the village president while people were addressing the public hearing was just sickening. I'm very sad after the work I've put in and the people that I know in the village government, the village board, and you guys, the staff. It's really disheartening. And I can't be in village
I'm
government.
sorry, this is your second chance to chat, and we're at 8:20 now. I'd like to respond to you. First, Abe, please don't crash. And then secondly, I just like to say we are updating the zoning code, and the specific suggestion you have about public notice for PDP amendments could definitely be part of the discussion on the zoning code update.
I think we lost him.
Yeah. Thank you all for attending. Jane, you have the mic. Would you like to say anything before or to close the meeting?
I just want to say I'm glad to see the interest and to see people participate. Housing is a critical part of our community growth and development, and to create a community where people are at peace and feel that they are able to live here in a secure, safe, and happy environment. So I'm very glad to have people participate. We have many different sorts of needs for housing and neighborhoods, and we're looking at all of that diversity and trying to figure out how to address all of those needs. So we appreciate your input and your support, and look forward to sharing with you the results of the plan. So thank you for participating.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you very much for coming tonight. Our next steps, please visit the webpage to stay close in touch with the process. And over the next couple of months, we'll be unveiling these chapters. So thanks again for your time tonight. Sorry to keep you a little long.
Thanks,
Good night,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Good night.
you. Good night.
Bye-bye.